we may together build a land where knowledge is free, where the mind is without fear and the head is high, and where words come from the depth of truth. Grant us, O God, the needed guidance, so that we may deal justly with the several causes that come before us, laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and personal preferences, so that the result of our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion, preservation of justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the President, and the peace and prosperity of Guyana. Grant us, O God, provision so to lead, that all the people of this fair land may enter that state of brotherhood and unity, where the mind is light powered by thee, and the ever-widening thought and action.
Thank you. Honorable members, please be seated.
Messages from the President. Announcements by the Speaker.
Honorable members, before we start, let me take this opportunity to extend on your behalf, on behalf of the clerk and the staff, birthday greetings to the Honorable Minister of Culture, Youth and Sport, Charles Ramson, and His Excellency, the Honorable Dr. Bharat Chagdi.
Presentation of petitions, presentation of papers and reports, etc. Statements by ministers, including policy statements, personal explanations, requests for leave to move the adjournment of the National Assembly on definite matters of urgent public importance, motions relating to the sitting or business of the National Assembly and moved by minister, introduction of bills, public business, government's business.
Honorable members, the Assembly will continue the debate on the motion for the approval of the estimates of expenditure for financial year 2024. Our first speaker today is the Honorable Kemraj Ramjatan. Honorable member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, let me do the protocols and thank, of course, Minister Ashley Singh for doing the presentation of this budget. I know in the context of a paradigm shift of our economy into the bigger times, as I would call it, it is especially important that how he did not get it right. Mr. Speaker, I would also like to congratulate his staff for doing as best as they could, knowing the instructions from the and of course the minister himself. Mr. Speaker, I would like to open by saying that government spending is the core function of what a government must do during the course of the year. And of course, the budgetary process starts with the tabling of the estimates and the presentation of the speech. And I must indicate that in view of the tremendous windfall of wealth that we have as a result of that signing of the agreement in 2016 with Exxon, my hopes were dashed consequent upon seeing what has happened here in the spending and the priorities put for the spending in this budget. It is no doubt a time in Guyana when we have so much money that could be doing so many things, but a nation must invest in ending poverty. And its working poor must get a better deal. I feel, and this is my opinion, that that has not happened with a budget. Could we not be interrupted? It is important then that we feel that this monies should have been more spread across rather than being given largely to what I regard as 1,000 contractor crony capitalists who will benefit from that $662 billion, which is what is the capital expenditure. Mr. Ashley Singh, Dr. Ashley Singh here, must appreciate that at this macro level, we are having basically a very lopsided treatment of the monies. Mr. Ashley Singh, and of course I'm certain at the instructions of Mr. Barjagdeo, another doctor, must have known, like the editorial of Stabrook News yesterday indicated in relation to a woman, Lilauti Hardial, that indeed times are hard in the 10th richest country in the world per capita. And that rather than spending so much money on roads and all the construction, we ought to have at least put $100 billion more into that and subtract it from capital expenditure. That is what we should have done. A couple of years ago, Mr. Speaker, I was in this parliament indicating that there is massive mismanagement of funds when capital works are given big spaces. And you know, I quoted then from an extremely important economist who had done studies in these matters. And these matters were dealt with in a book called The Bottom Billion. The important thing here, sir, is what he said at page 138. And I'll quote it. It has the word corruption, but it is a quote from a textbook.
Honorable member, we have a rule about reputation.
Yes. What reputation? 10 years ago, sir?
Not only 10 years ago, I think I've heard this over my past decade and a half from your own mouth, and we can get the record. But please expunge that part. You can say beep.
All right. By contrast, the mismanagement of funds in the construction sector has been a dirty secret. Transparency International decided to bring it out to greater prominence by devoting its global report of 2005 in the sector. Construction has all ingredients conducive to mismanagement of funds. I use that alternative. Each project is a one-time only thing, and so cannot readily be priced. There are so many uncertainties in execution that it is not possible to draw up what economists refer to as a complete contract. As a result, it is easy to evade the discipline that would otherwise be imposed by competitive tendering. A crooked construction company colludes with a public official to win the contract with artificially low bid, then recontract on points of detail that crop up during construction. Credible studies for some countries that estimates of how mismanagement of the funds in the construction sector is raising the cost of infrastructure and thereby reducing growth. And these effects are large. Of course, he goes on to say that this is an attribute generally of what you call natural resource economies, just like Guyana in view of the oil. Mr. Speaker, what we have in this budget is a spending of $662 billion in infrastructure of all varieties. And what we have as wages and salaries and pensions is $121 billion. Mr. Speaker, when we go back to the practical realities of what it is that the construction contractors will make it is generally in the vicinity of about 20% profit for each contract. 20% of profits for each contract will make $133 billion, which will then go to some companies and some private contractors, and that is about 1,000 of them, Mr. Speaker. It is roughly 1,000 of them that win the contracts over the years in the PPP government, and so you have $133 billion going towards this 1,000. What we have as emoluments for the public servants, which includes police and soldier and public servants administration and all of that, is about 54,000. 54,000. What do you have as pensioners? You have about 40,000. Well, I see inside of this budget speech, Mr. Ashley Singh indicating, Honorable Member, that it is 72,000. 76,000. Now, if you add 76,000 to 54,000 public servants, and they're getting $121 billion as against $133 billion for about 1,000, we are going to create a caste system in this country. That's not unparliamentary, sir. Caste system, whereby the inequality is going to be so vast to the extent whereby they are literally going to control this economy. Every single one of them would go and purchase friendships literally with members of the government as, again, the bottom billion states. It is an important aspect of the matter to appreciate, because how could you spend so much on infrastructure knowing that you have the Lilautis, Gurdials, all those things? By the way, in the Stabrook News, that was the 52nd edition of the cost of living interviews. So many people have been stating, but we do have some of them in the government now stating that, look, a lot of people have been praising the budget. A lot of people have been praising the budget. Well, let's be balanced. How many people have been indicating that this thing is hard and life is so difficult all across the country? It is indeed a toxic combination too that we have when you're going to have a set of oligarchs in this country. A set of oligarchs in combination with a set of control freaks, because everything they want to control. They want to control the press, they want to control what people think, and a whole lot of things. That is why at this budget, that combination is going to be disastrous for this country. It will be called the control oligarchs. It is a sickening situation. And we are not seeing that poverty is being confronted. As I have said on other occasions, necessitous, and quoting from, I think it was President Roosevelt, necessitous men are not free men. People who can't afford 2 square meals in Guyana are not going to be free. And all flourishing is mutual, because poverty anywhere is a threat to prosperity everywhere. It is fundamental then that we do not make a portion of our country one that is embarrassed, because poverty and being poor induces a lot of shame. It induces embarrassment. It's a diminishment of life. It is a feeling that your government is against you, as some have told us. I have gone to the estate areas and they have indicated that although we voted for this government, oh my gee, they said the government seems to be against us, and the constant fear, Mr. Speaker, and the constant fear that it will get worse. That is what people think. It will create this caste system, as I said, and a second-class citizens. Mr. Speaker, we must advocate the building of consensus. Lots of PPP people have been calling on me and pleading that let us have more consensus. We have a paradigm shift now that necessitates what is called a shared prosperity. But I don't know if we're going to have that, because as a matter of fact, we feel that these people, oligarchs is the word, they do not want to be persuaded by any argument that comes from the other side. We need, in relation to this matter, sir, a leadership which cultivates an ethic of genuine care, compassion, and concern for every human being. Mr. Speaker, I want to say we did lots more in relation to what they're now doing with this big set of money. And that was brilliantly exposited by Ms. Juretta Finance and of course the speakers yesterday as to what we are doing and what we did in that 5-year period. Less money, and we did lots more. We did lots more for public servants. We did lots more for the working poor. And when we built the roads with a small amount of money, run to them and say, are we going to eat road? You got $202 billion now, the roads. And Hardial stating that we can't get more than 1 meal a day. What is that? It is an atrocity and a monstrosity. Mr. Speaker, I want to indicate that also amongst this 1,000 or so, we see that the government is being extraordinarily friendly with them. They are tax dodgers to a large extent, this class. And as stated in Mr. Christopher Ram's focus and analysis, he has indicated that a lot of these self-employed and contractor class do not, with all the big monies they make, pay their taxes to the extent of what is supposed to be the right taxes. What we had done in 2015 to 2020 was to create a withholding tax so that at least we could have some amount of money from the big profits they make. Everybody, taxes and payments of taxes is the first duty of citizenship, in my opinion. It is. Of course I do. And it's, Mr. Speaker, the withholding.
Remember, Mr. McCoy, please. I've been cautioning people about parliamentary language, and I heard you quite distinctly just now. Please, control yourself.
Yes, please. This withholding tax is an important aspect to ensure that at least some income comes into the budget, or at least the consolidated fund, for the purposes of ensuring that they pay their due amount. But it was repealed as soon as this government came in. It was repealed. And this is why I say, as I have said some 10 years ago, that this government is extremely close with that class of people, the crony, capitalist, contractor class, to the detriment of the working class. And it is an amazing thing, Mr. Speaker, that these are the people who use, and they still got it in the constitution, in the party, that they are the vanguard of the working class. You can state that, but at the concrete level, you are but a cement and sand government. At the concrete level, you are a sand and cement government. And that is what it is. You are not working class at all. And so you could go and take that. Mr. Speaker, there must be a balanced approach that should have gone into the distribution of the spendings here. We haven't seen that. This rebalancing is necessary because sometimes you can overheat an economy by spending so much money on infrastructure when you do not have the capacity and the capabilities. It was mentioned yesterday what you have to do in relation to stalled projects. And some of the projects being stalled, there is absolutely no disciplining of those contractors, even giving more addition and fuel that indeed there is a bias for that class. You have to start taking away the contracts, Mr. Edghill. You have to start ensuring that they don't do this indisciplined thing. But we are going to have nothing of the sort. You know why? Because you go back to the bottom billion. Why countries are poor? How countries fall apart? It is because of this elite nexus with them, so that their treasury chest is going to be filled for, let's say, a 2025 elections. Mr. Speaker, it is annoying as to what is transpiring with the kind of money. We had wanted the oil monies to be harnessed in such a way that everybody will share in the pie. But no, we have an exclusive set of people dealing with it. It is not going to help this country. And as I have said somewhere else, it is going to create what is called disenchantment and resentment at the bottom there. When people see that some sets are getting, and especially if the majority of that set comes from a certain demographic, it is going to create problems for this country. The cohesion that we want, the one Guyana that we want, will not come when you pour $668 billion towards them with a 20% arrangement, and then, of course, even other things flowing from that, as against 121 billion. So I want to say my fundamental critique here is that indeed there was not a proper priority set so that everybody can distribute the shared prosperity that we wanted out of a budget. And that is why we signed the agreement, an agreement which they chastised, as you know, Mr. Speaker, that it was rotten agreement. We're going to renegotiate it as soon as we come into power. They can't renegotiate now. Sanctity of contract is their mantra, as it were. Mr. Speaker, it is going to be an extraordinarily difficult year, in my opinion, based on this budget, for the simple reason that you are going to get the cost of living going further up. As was mentioned, and I do not want to go over the statistics, although I had gotten some of the statistics too, in the local industries of fishing and agriculture and gold production and everything else, as was stated so brilliantly by Director of Finance yesterday and articulately, every one of those were doing better in the APNU AFC time as against what we have now. And when you rebase it, and you rebase the base amount, and you could talk about 28% increase, but what was mentioned by Giretta, the amount of earnings that we were bringing in from fisheries and forestry and all of those, the statistics are there, was far superior. That is going to cause a tremendous amount, what you call the resource cost, as it were, because indeed our local industries are now diminishing. And that diminishment will see cost of even items that we produce in Guyana going upwards. Even the Baji and the Bora and the Baigan, we are going to have all those prices going up. And then, of course, I suppose then they're going to run to that $7 billion relief package. And you know what, Mr. Speaker? Distribute to their friends and families. It is happening now as I speak. They have this arrangement whereby PPP activists are distributing monies and they're bypassing coalition supporters. I have seen and heard, of arrangements whereby some of the PPP supporters are begging the activists, please ensure that you give that man something, not because he's a known opposition person. And they get the money, they have it some, and they're distributing. Is that how you run country? Why is it that you do not have an accountable system that states who is doing the distribution and also who collected, say like the entrepreneurial 250, young entrepreneurs or small businesses, $250,000. We have been asking all the time, look, it is not a burden that is shifted to us in the opposition. It is a burden that is on you to prove who and who you give the money to. But you don't want to give us since the COVID relief we ask, the flood relief we ask, the fishermen's relief we ask. You never provided it. And then you said, show me the proof, show me the evidence. That is not how you operate a country accountably. And you must understand too, Mr. Speaker, that these persons don't understand that democracy got certain pillars. They emphasize an important pillar, and I agree with them, free and fair elections. But it has good governance, it has rule of law, and it has accountability as the three other equal important pillars. We are not getting the accountability one here at all, apart from the rule of law that was mentioned by our shadow AG, Roysdale Ford, yesterday. And so it is important that we get these figures. I have been asking, take for example, what was it that was given to some members after the flood relief, and was told by the agriculture minister, we don't have any information to give. How could you do that? And the fishermen's also relief. Mr. Speaker, it is important to understand that if we want to get there into the promised land, now that we have gotten the money that could take us there, we need to have accountability and transparency. We need to have the rule of law and not only jump on this thing about elections, because ultimately you want it, you're there, you're in government. But the institutions, for now, accountability, how monies are spent and all of that, we don't know. And take, for example, before I go on to public security, just before the ink was drying on the budget presentation, we heard that we're going to get some helicopters and all of that. I went into the budget and look at capital expenditures and then the volume 3, and I'm looking for where we're going to get the helicopters monies from. There is nothing. They are not being, they're very stealthy. They're secretive. They're not indicating that the foreign equipment, well, we could understand that one, helicopters and air aviation equipment or whatever. And so I don't know, but I'll be asking the questions. But the vice president has indicated that yes, we are dealing with a firm, Bell and all of that, to the extent of 4 helicopters. Mr. Speaker, that is not good enough. And we must not, I will wish to make a concluding remark on this, we must not borrow so much. Mr. Indar, honorable member, indicated that we wanted tax. But does he understand that when you borrow in the 4-year, 1.3 billion US dollars, that is a tax on our future generations? And it is worse because we don't know if the oil prices are going to stabilize with all the volatilities in the world and the vulnerabilities. Yet you come here and you cuss us down for some minor taxes and increases that we had, and we have been asking you to provide us with the 200 names, and you can't, but you got from 2020 to 2024 now, $1.3 billion in borrowings to what? As Asghar Ali would say, to bill away the money. Mr. Speaker, we must get all the facts from the various remarks and legends on this budget as to where it is that the money is going, so that we could keep scrutiny. A good opposition could only scrutinize also when there's information that ought to be provided. And you, Mr. Speaker, and myself go back a long time. You yourself used to make that remark when you were an opposition parliamentarian. Mr. Speaker, I come now to the public security sector. And I've got to begin by stating that it would appear that my colleague, Mr. Ben, have been coming up with some otherwise outrageous policy statements. One of which is, all you out there that got illegal guns, take them and throw them at the police station and bring them in. That is top class security policy. And it is in that context that I wish to say that this aspect of security, of ensuring that there is quality analysis as to what a policy should be, must come from this government, because there is no shortage of funds now to get the expertise necessary if you are not an expert. And it was inexpert of the minister to say what he said. But I think he intended it to make laughter more than anything. But you mustn't play like that with the security sector. In view of what we did in the APNU AFC coalition, of ensuring that there was an amnesty in which you know who and who have all the firearms and then they bring it in, that's the necessary way of doing it. We see today, even the minister admitting, I think I'll write it down here, road deaths, 76% increase, fires increased by 182%, and this is only of last year, and a number of other things, road deaths, murders, and all of that. I am glad that the minister is indicating that indeed these statistics have been at least given to him by the police force, and he's bringing it to our attention. But in this sphere of activity, it is vitally necessary that we continue what the APNU AFC had done. Mr. Speaker, we had two major projects. One was the British Security Sector Report, and the other, the Citizens Security Strengthening Report. These are important reports which made a set of recommendations, and in the set of recommendations, you have to now implement. We had indicated to them that we want the monies from the British security sector reform, but we also want the brains behind it. And the brains behind it was a man called Mr. Russell Coombe. And he knew the network of experts that you could go and talk about how to enhance your maritime capabilities, how to enhance the police strategic unit, how to improve the human resource within the police force and all of that. And all of these reports came out in and around a period of study, and they came out around, I think, 2019. And these reports are important for the development. We must not, because there's a change in government, surrender those reports or shelve them. We must continue. I am not seeing that happen. I even created a change board to ensure that that happens.
Honorable member, before you go to that board, you need an extension.
This is very quick, ma'am.
Actually, you got 2 minutes more.
Thanks very much for that, Vincent. Could I have 2 minutes more in the 5?
Comrade Speaker, I do move that the honorable member be given 5 minutes to conclude his presentation.
Thank you, Opposition Chief Whip. Honorable member, you may continue to conclude.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for that extension. I want to say in this 5 minutes that I have that there were accountability in the public security sector under APNU AFC. Yesterday, Mr. Jones, honorable member, stated how we have a public security committee of the parliament that was created under the robust constitutional reform process. The all members of that committee during the course of the APNU coalition government, we were in every way dealing with all the questions that they want answered. And Mr. Gale, and I think the honorable member himself, Mr. Ben, were members of that committee. And they were asking me for after we convened the first meeting, we would like to hear what the commissioner has to say as his projections. We would like to see Mr. Gentle, what he had to say. Vernon Gentle, I think his name is, fire chief, and Samuels as the head of the prison. And they cross-examined these people for hours in that committee. You know, since we got the committee, as you said yesterday, Mr. Jones, not one meeting for 2020, 21, 22, 23. 4 years, not a meeting. And on the last occasion, I asked Mr. Ben, why you don't convene the meeting so that we can ask questions of everything and scrutinize everything, right up to firearms license and everything. No, they do not want that. But Ramjatan, as public security member, opened it up so you can ask all the questions from any department, because under the Constitution, the power of this Public Security Committee of Parliament is to ensure all administration matters and policy matters are questioned in that community. Where it is, they do not want scrutiny. And this is where I'm saying about accountability. But they will go and get people like this fella here talking stupidness about all kinds of things. Mr. Speaker, I also want to say, unlike a lot of other presidents, Mr. Granger indicated that every minister must have a quinquennial report for that 5 years that we served in government. He wanted accountability. And the Ministry of Public Security quinquennial report 2015 to 2020 was left in the ministry. I think it was left by all ministers for the ministers that will come in, by our ministers. And well, whatever it is, I left mine there. And I've even given the press the thing. But every item concerning how many police stations we built and remodeled, what we did in relation to activation of the 911 Emergency Response Center, the donation from China of so many vehicles that we had, the US Embassy donations for strategic planning, citizen security strengthening, in almost 40 pages, it is documented. So people can't come and say that it is not there. Of course he has it, the PS had it, but what he did with the PS? Put this PS somewhere else and he gone deal with somebody called, is it Thomas? Thomas. And we know what happened there. We also see today that the strategic management of the fire department was disbanded. And look what we're having now. And then you got a report from Mahdia about a certain person. That person, Mr. Speaker, by the way, had his life extended because he was 55 at 2022. And it is important then that so many things that are happening in the police and the fire and the prison is consequent upon not the continuation of these experts' advice coming wrong. Mr. Speaker, there's lots to be done in the public security sector. And I am willing here and would love to have a consensus and also a collaboration with the Honorable Minister to ensure that our security, the country's security, is provided for. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. And now for the Honorable Minister of Home Affairs, the Honorable Brinley Horatio Ben.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and honorable members. Mr. Chairman, again, I'd like to congratulate the Honorable Minister of Finance, Dr. Ashley Singh, in respect of preparing and presenting to this House a massive $1 trillion budget which sets a new bar for the provisioning of monies for the continuous development of Guyana. Mr. Speaker, this budget and the opportunity it presents was one which could only have been led on.
Honorable Minister,
have been presented.
Honorable Minister, I need to caution the Honorable Mahipal. You can go ahead. You want to deal with the Honorable Minister, please, you could go outside.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Go ahead.
Mr. Speaker, the reason that Ashley Singh presented a budget on behalf of the PPPC government back again in power is because the APNU ASC was dismissed by the people of Guyana. The people of Guyana dispatched
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the PPPC in government is back here because of the trust of the Guyanese people, because the Guyanese people rejected the attempts to steal our democracy, rejected their attempts to steal their votes, rejected their attempts.
Minister, you have to withdraw the word steal. One time, two times, you can't impute.
To take away, sorry, if I withdraw, to take away inappropriately the votes, undermine and damage our constitution, and had in full view of the international media online the naked attempts to take away the votes, democracy of the Guyanese people. And here it is, again, the descent into perhaps madness, which I've complained about before in this House, when we skirmish on questions of the development of the country. Mr. Speaker, one of the criticisms I've noted from the other side on the question of the budget, and even just now by the former Minister of Public Security, now my shadow, with the hope perhaps of getting back into the position in which I sit at the current time, is that too much money is being spent on capital investment, and not enough money is being spent on issues related to people directly. And just now, Mr. Ramjatan spoke again something about a corrupt contractor class and a new caste being created in the country as a result of how monies are spent. But Mr. Speaker, coming from where we are, where we were, at the time we came back into power, there was decrepit infrastructure all over Guyana. Physical infrastructure, energy infrastructure, infrastructure related to health, education, everything was decrepit. And also in relation to issues of public security that the honorable member, by convention of the House, spoke of. It is true, and it should be a simplism, a simple thing, that even if you give a person money and they can't get to the hospital, they can't get to the school, there's no energy, that there's no way that you can take the country forward. And so the investment in infrastructure is a sine qua non for our country's development here and now. In roads, in bridges, in energy infrastructure, it's a sine qua non that this is the priority. And the honorable member, by convention of the House, Ramjatan, I don't want to use the word obnoxious, but perhaps it's more appropriate. But he's a lawyer, and lawyers are supposed to say anything without a conscience, perhaps. But, Mr. Speaker, the honorable member spoke about people not being given money or enough to do things. It was the honorable member, as part of the conjoint twin of the AP and UFC, who struck off and closed down its sugar estates, who fired 7,000 sugar workers in this country, a sugar-producing country, who paid no attention to the 28,000 dependents that these sugar workers had. And he comes here and talks about we being the vanguard of the working class. The honorable member talk about a contractor, corrupt class or something or the other. But apparently these contractors is take the money, put 20% profit, and the rest of the money, nobody works, maintain the machines, working to dig the roads, doing the surveying, doing all the things which need to be done to develop the economy. They don't come, they don't pay taxes. That is what is implicit in what he's saying. Yes, yes, yes. Those people don't matter. Those who make the machines, repair the roads, fix the roads, those who provide the services in relation to all of those issues, what is implicit in what he's saying is they don't matter. And the honorable member, the significant part of the conjoint twin of the AP and UAFC. And you can't perhaps cut them off because they might both die. But the honorable member sat there in complicit with the APNU and allowed for workers in the bauxite industry being made to block the river at Kokoni, closing down the Russell investment, losing several hundred workers at 1,000 plus there, and another 300 down the river in the transshipment at New Amsterdam. Over 1,200 people lost their jobs and their dependents. They made the workers, some of them complicit in their own misery and downfall. Those people have no work today. And the honorable member came here and expounds and espouses about vanguard of the working class and so on. Mr. Speaker, the man is now my shadow. And I don't know why he thinks that he perhaps will come back into the position. I don't know why we should have the travesty. And Metal also wrote something, a historical novel, Shadows Move Among Them, about the Borbis River, about some man going there to set up a commune and trying to get away from authoritarian leadership. But they're all shadows moving amongst them. We must read Metal House again, Frank. A lady, honorable to in this house, McCoy has a particular word in relation to her. He's complicit in the removal of funds related to GT&T. And the Financial Intelligence Unit and the SOCO have work to do in respect of that. But they come here without any feelings in the matter. Millions of dollars. They come here and plant themselves down, create distress and disruption, and then walk out. Mr. Speaker, I do not want to deal too much with the issues of all the lies, fraud, falsification, plagiarism, political depravity, which all of this shows here in this House, even in the absence of the APNU AFC. I will not go down the road of taking advantage of their absence too much, except for a few of them. The honored member who led off for us on the debate on the APNU side, Mr. Roysdale Ford, said that the budget was uninspiring. Uninspiring. No talk about the volume of money which is there to critique, criticize, but to be placed to develop our country. But perhaps when he says it's uninspiring, he's looking at himself in the mirror as a lawyer too. But the questions we have, the issues we have, and the questions and the critique perhaps which was raised just now on the question of the meeting of the Public Security Committee, I got to take a few steps back. I remember when there were attempts being made to steal the vote of the Guyanese people, whichever way it went. There was a Minister of Public Security then. The first and only one we had. His name is on the board here. Honorable by convention of the House Camaraderie Ramtatan. And there were calls being made when there were disruptions and bricks were being thrown and bottles outside the GCOM headquarters. I was then Commissioner GCOM. And I spoke with the police, leading person in the police, police inspectors and superintendents. People were assaulted, bricks were thrown at them, and I went out to get it to stop. Of course, those people were PPP supporters, PPP supporters. And they came to me terrified for me to get the police, to give them support, to take them to a place of safety. And so I went to the police chiefs on the road then, pointed out the situation which they knew of, but they turned their backs on it. And you know what they told me? You're on your own. You're on your own. And so the brickbats and bottles and bricks kept going, and we had to find ways to get ordinary Guyanese people to safety. And Mr. Ramtatan, honorable member, and I was never a member of the committee which he was speaking of before, expects me, in all that we experience, to rush to have meetings with him on these issues. On the southeastern wrap of this building here, I had a physical struggle with the police who were trying to remove me, remove other comrades who were sitting here in this house. I was injured, still have niggling things. Tried to physically remove me, and bump me down, and lift me up and fetch me away as a commissioner of the Guyanese Elections Commission. Only because I was sitting there to avoid them going into those boxes, those containers that evening, which they planned to do. I had to hold on to their legs and hold on to the rails. I called the General Secretary of the party in a moment, and Frank and Ms. Manik Chan came to my rescue and support. Yeah, later on. So he wants me, when they have undermined the police forces, when they have confused the question of their loyalty, whether it's a constitution, conscious people, or to a political party. He wants me to not pay attention to bringing back us from that malaise, that inattention, that corruption, that in lack of integrity, which those forces have had in their minutes over the years of their misrule. Should we really be speaking to them on these matters in the parliament, in a committee? Or shouldn't they be in the courts, facing the judiciary on these issues in relation to the attempted theft, take away, purloining of our democracy? And coming here sanctimoniously speaking to the public, to Guyanese young people about their wonderful exploits here in this house and in service as ministers in this country. They had practically destroyed, subsumed, corrupted the discipline services. It's only when the army commander then, when challenged on the issue, said that he will uphold the Constitution of Guyana. Brigadier Godfrey Bess, who deserves our commendation in this matter. The police could not be relied on. The rest could not be relied on. Many of them, if you look at their social media posts, even today you'll be shocked. No consideration for country, people, constitution, and democracy. Anyway, Ramjatan, the honorable member, is gone. I have advised him before that if he's going to make a contribution outside, either by taking a hit or going to the washroom, he should not flush because he might disappear. Mr. Speaker and honorable members, one day, the full and complete record of the disgrace that the APNU, AFC have brought this country and its constitution to will be clearly written. And it will be helped along much by what is done in the courts, and if not properly done, in the Caribbean Court of Justice. I don't think we have to go to the ICJ for this. Mr. Speaker, I want to speak somehow on the challenges we have in our security sector, the total framing around the Guyana Police Force, the Guyana Prison Service, the Guyana Fire Service, the ministry's agencies, and the challenge we have, as we say, of increasing the peace in Guyana. Increasing the peace in Guyana. We cannot increase in Guyana with that group because they are not a reliable partner. They don't understand or want to understand constitutional democracy. They are, in other words, insurrectionists. Insurrectionists. Perhaps more of the Trumpian kind. And they had the TSU chasing out us from the center in town there, in the Ashman building. The TSU came with their guns and their things and chased us out. And now they're suddenly a reliable partner. Now they love people. We'll get to the point somehow when they change some of the people they have. We'll get to the point somehow if they get a reset in respect of their way of thinking. We'll get to the point somehow where they actually respect other Guyanese people. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to go first to the questions of the Guyana Fire Service because it has some public interest at the moment. While we speak overall in respect of crime, for 3 years running, for the first time in decades, we reduced crime by 20%, serious crime, in 2022. Same in 2021 before that, and in 2023 by 17%. In Guyana, in spite of all the bad things you see happening, it is true that murders increase. It is true that we have an increase in domestic murders. It is true that we have disorderly murders, which are creating a great burden of the police force and the communities which they secure. But overall, crime continues to drop, to decline under the PPPC in government. In our manifesto, we talked about less crime and safer communities. In respect of the Guyana Fire Service and coming out of the total issues of COVID, we have had great challenges. The great challenges relate to a larger number of fire calls. In 2022, we had 1,480 calls. In 2023, 4,181 calls, 182% increase in calls relating to responses to fire. We have had, along with it, complete damages of buildings, businesses, motor cars, government properties, and so on. We have had the great sorrow of the tragic event at Madhya, where we lost 24 young people. And those young people come mainly from the most stressed quality of our Guyanese people, our indigenous community. In the review of the matter, President Mohammed Irfan Ali established a commission of inquiry, a presidential commission of inquiry into the May 20th, 2021 23 fire. There were reports made in respect of the responsibilities of the various agencies who revolved around some responsibility in relation to the question of the fire. It is true that when Honorable Member Rantatan was Minister of Public Security, he did receive a report which stated that the issues in relating to the dormitories in the interior had to be resolved. That Minister of Public Security who is now not here. Later on, there were reports to the Ministry of Education commissioned by the Honorable Priya Manik Chan in relation to the responses, in relation to investing in safer school buildings and investing in better dormitories. And I'm sorry Mr. Ramatan is not here because he was one of those who was cutting the budget, cutting the budget when we were in the previous government to cut down investment in health, education, public security.
Yes.
That same fellow. But he knows when to escape. I want to say, not simply in defense of the Guyana Fire Service, cut and run, that the Guyana Fire Service, under the protocols established, haven't given the reports in respect of doing improvements in relation to fire service, fire safety, does not have the responsibility or did not have the responsibility to do those things themselves. It is incumbent on the house owner, of the owner of the building, of whoever is the agency which owns the building to put those things in place for follow-up inspections by the Guyana Fire Service. It is true that there were inadequacies in relation to one, a fire call, which was a delayed fire call. The building was well alight by the time the fire service got there. And also, there was the question of them being able to break into the building even when they arrived. And there was questions of how best to treat with the children when they did rescue children from the building. And I want to say, in spite of all of that happened, the Guyana Fire Service personnel rescued persons from the building, children. The event at Madhya was, for me personally, one of the most difficult things. I landed at Madhya at 3:30, I think, in the morning, and went immediately to the hospital and to the scene of the fire, to the mortuary and saw the children, and had work done to have them properly placed and set up so that it would not bring greater distress to ourselves. What we have done so far, the Guyana Fire Service itself, on request of the ministry, has gone to each and every dorm and school building in the interior particularly to put in smoke alarms, extinguishers, fireballs, sand buckets, and all other means, extinguishers, to prevent issues relating to fire. And they have also, again, done reviews and practices in relation to enhancing knowledge in relation to fires and the risks that it poses. One of the problems at Madhya, and I've said somewhere else, that at the time, perhaps to some extent, even now, the environment is toxic, and that we need to do more work to calm down some of these communities where people coming out with money, with gold, with diamonds, being a long way from their homes, do not have the best behavior and prey on young girls in the communities. Mr. Speaker, I wish to say shortly in relation to the question of fire is that we have to continue to carry the message of greater fire awareness. We have to advise that once a fire starts in the building, given the nature of the materials of the building, if it's an old house now, and if you have a lot of blinds and sponge material in the house, within 5 to 7 minutes maximum, the house is lost. And if you can't get out of that in that period of time, you might be severely injured or you may die. And so the overall question of fire safety is a particularly important one for us. We are investing more and more in relation to fire protection. We are buying new vehicles, water carriers. We are buying a new fireboat in relation to the amount of work and the response thereto being done on the harbor in Demerara and for other places. We are looking at putting in place new fire stations. We have just completed one at Wales, and we anticipate looking at more fire station emplacements throughout the country. There's rehabilitation work going on at the fire station at West Ramveld. There's work going on in relation to acquiring new fire units. We bought a new crash tender for the Ogle Fire Station, and we have also made a new building for that fire station. We are working with Angloco of the United Kingdom in relation to getting a complete new set of fire trucks along with the requisite spares, because maintenance is indeed a problem. And I remember while we talk about that Minister Manichan and I went to a fire just after we came to government, the multilateral school. The fire service then brought out 5 mobile pumps. None of them worked. Not one of them worked. That's what we inherited from Ramjatan. We had the fire around the corner from us near the courts, where it was obvious that the firemen could not engage and go into the building to fight the fire because they did not have breathing apparatus to prevent themselves from collapsing, so they stayed far away from the fires. It is apt to note that the feeling you had at the beginning was, to use the Guyanese parlance, that they were frightened. They were not well protected, and their own awareness of their safety was very low. We will reconstruct the Leonora Fire Station. We will reconstruct the Diamond Fire Station. We are making improvements to the fire stations, Bartica, in terms of the way to get out of that area. And particularly, we want to applaud the work along with the Ministry of Health with the emergency medical technicians. People are not aware, and people perhaps don't pay enough attention, but every day we get several calls for medical services, for the ambulance services, and that service is doing a sterling job in relation to getting to persons who may have problems. In fact, they've delivered a number of babies, I think 14 or more last year. So on our PR side, we have to speak more about these things and the fact that they bring people to proper medical care after giving emergency medical care on site.
Honorable Minister, you will need an extension of time to conclude.
Mr. Speaker.
I'd like to ask that the honorable member be given 5 more minutes to conclude his very good presentation.
Thank you, Minister. You have 5 minutes to conclude.
Mr. Speaker, it's amazing how time flies at this podium. I have a lot which I could say on the Guyana Police Force, on the Customs Anti-Narcotics Unit, on our immigration services, on the GRO, all of the prison service too, All of those are giving sterling service to Guyana. All of those units now are on the road to better improvement, better work ethic, better professionalism, better standards of delivery, better consciousness in relation to the work that they do. In relation to the issues of fire, maybe a more emotive issue is that I want to propose that we have, in remembrance on the day of the Madhya fire, at all fire stations and at the ministry, a Fire Victims Awareness Day, where we have the pictures of the young people who died, and where we will place flowers, and also at the site of that tragic incident. I want to applaud the work of the Guyana Police Force. There is so much that we could do. It's unfortunately, Ramjatan isn't here, honorable member. He took over the CSSP. The Community Security Initiative was established under former PPP Minister of Home Affairs, Clement Rohi. But here again, he comes brazenly, broad-facedly, taking something as his own, which he didn't start. Mr. Chairman, I want to pay some attention to the Guyana Prison Service on one particular issue. Or two issues. Firstly, an escape which occurred last year, a run through the jungle by persons who were involved in the killing of men, women, and children at Lusignan and Bartica, and which somehow they anticipated that we would have allowed for the escape, along with those who were supporting the escape. And some of those who helped the escape were prison officers who are facing the law now. But we brought the run through the jungle to an end. And I want to call on the prison service publicly again, maximum vigilance. We put in cameras, we are making new prison buildings, a new prison schools, a new women's prison, a new vocational school, a new school for training of prisoners. We have talked about a Fresh Start program where we will train up prisoners to be useful when they leave the prison environment, where we give them the tools for a trade going forward. We can only increase the peace if we reduce recidivism and when we avoid those persons on going back out, have to resort to crime and have no way of integrating back with their families or supporting themselves. And we see that as a great problem. The prison system has the obligation going forward to provide for itself 50% of the greens and vegetables and fruits that they produce. And we intend to help to pay the prisoners for the effort they put into raising those things, along with the chickens and the eggs and so on, which we want them to have and to eat. But extreme vigilance. Mr. Chairman, the Honorable Member Ramjatan escaped the area when you were talking about firearms. And a question was thrown at me recently in relation to firearms and amnesty. And if we looked at the question today, if we looked at the question in the papers today of what happened with the firearm that the young man who shot the girl dead and escaped to the Suriname, you see what happened where the firearm went along the way. If you have an illegal firearm, we will fine you. We'll increase fines in relation to that. We'll increase fines in relation to road deaths, in relation to issues related to bad traffic work. We believe if you have a firearm, turn it in. Don't set us up for us to pay for you to get money in relation to handing in a firearm, and then we don't know necessarily the lineage, what it was done with it, and we will give you money for it. Amnesty is for another time in relation to firearms. But read today's paper in relation to the question of illegal firearms. Mr. Speaker, I was prepared to talk a lot and specific, but as usual, the heckling presentations from the other side had to be responded to. And their responses are a priority in relation to our understanding of how we move to the position of increasing the peace and achieving the one Guyana that our President Irfan Ali so much desires. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. And now for the Honorable Member, Mr. Vincent Henry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of the Guyana Action Party, GAP, and a member of the coalition, I rise to make my contribution on the 2024 budget debate that has as its slogan, keeping the course, etc., etc. Mr. Speaker, sometimes when you come to Parliament, you have to use your skills as a teacher or whatever you are before to teach some people. And I would like to let the Honorable Ben, Minister Ben, know that the Honorable Ramjatan merely said that contractors made 20% profit. Now, what does that mean? It means that you take out all the expenses and what is left is the profit. Where are you going, Honorable Ben? I wish to lecture to you a little bit. Mr. Speaker, indeed, the People's Progressive Party is keeping the course according to their slogan for this budget. And that course is by bypassing the majority of Guyanese in this and previous budgets, whose incomes relegate them to scraping survival on a daily basis. The policy, the policy of fattening the rich and hoping that the fat would trickle down has certainly become an abject failure and has widened the gap between the few who have and the majority who do not have. Mr. Speaker, before I delve further into the 2024 budget, please allow me to express on behalf of the peoples of the hinterland, who, by and large, are on the front line of our borders, sincere thanks to the leaders of our country and the people of Guyana for standing in unity in saying to Venezuela and the world that Essequibo is ours. I remember the words of Mr. Aubrey Norton, leader of the opposition, when he said that we have to first have a country, to first ensure that our sovereignty and territorial integrity are intact before we can struggle for political power. Mr. Speaker, the world heard our unified voice. However, as for modus operandi of the People's Progressive Party's government, who kept saying that we are unified against Venezuela, but by their actions deliberately continue to sideline the opposition. Since this event, there have been only a few sittings of the Foreign Relations Committee. Further, the leader of the opposition was also not included in the negotiations leading to the Argyle meeting. Mr. Speaker, quite recently, President Nicolas Maduro stated that he has a plan to get control of Essequibo. Mr. Speaker, the threat is far from over. And let me go back to my teaching skills again. I never said that he was invited. Put on your ears and listen. I did not say that. I said that we were not involved in any sort of discussions or meetings before that happened. That is what I said. Mr. Speaker, I want to repeat. Quite recently, President Nicolas Maduro stated that he has a plan to get control of Essequibo. Mr. Speaker, the threat is far from over. We, the indigenous peoples of Guyana, demand that any threat against our sovereignty and territorial integrity be met by a unified stance by our leaders. We request that the Foreign Relations Committee meet on a monthly statutory date to be decided on, and most importantly, be inclusive of the opposition's representatives and experts. You don't have all the experts. We have a lot. Involve them. This is Guyana. This is not PPP. This is Guyana. We also take note that monies allocated in our budget for the defense of our sovereignty and territorial integrity at a glance seems very inadequate. We request that the Guyana Defense Forces active and reserve components be prepared for any eventualities. We request that the community policing groups be given adequate training and support. We were told that community policing members are working without being paid monthly stipends or salaries. This must be corrected. Mr. Speaker, among others, we request that the National Service and the People's Militia be reactivated. Mr. Speaker, with the current oil boom, we request that our servicemen and women and their families be well catered for socio-economically by the state. You can't get them or us at the border defending the whole nation and not be treated properly. They are in the front line. How many of us would want to join the People's Militia? How many of us would want to join the army? I was in the People's Militia. I was a cadet corps officer at school. I was also in the Guyana National Service. How many of you could say the same thing? How many of you could say the same thing? Mr. Speaker, one of the hallmarks of great leaders is their strength, courage, and resilience in times of crises and threats. If we were to take a roll call on the 3rd of December, 2023, when Venezuela held its referendum, we would have seen those who used various excuses to flee Guyana. What is more important than standing with your people who are facing an existential threat? I know that the rule prevents us from calling names, but we know the men, you know the men, all of you know the men. I see Mr. McCoy, Honorable Carmen McCoy, has left because they left him back. They didn't take him away. That is how they will treat you in times of crisis, Mr. McCoy. Mr. Speaker, we listened to the Honorable Dr. Ashley Singh. But before I come to that, let me mention that the last time, I think it was early November, we had an extraordinary meeting of our parliament to come as a united front against whatever threats are there. I want the nation to know. I want the indigenous people of Guyana to know that after I spoke at that meeting, I guess, and it was because I spoke the truth about a certain de facto leader of Guyana, I was accosted afterwards and threatened by the Honorable Kwame McCoy. I want him to know, and the world to know, all of us have to die, but some die before others. When you threaten an indigenous person, especially a representative in parliament, you are threatening the indigenous peoples of Guyana. I will leave it there for now. Mr. Speaker, we listened to the Honorable Dr. Ashley Singh, who is still to be recognized as being capable enough to warrant or be given an independent ministry with an independent title of Senior Minister of Finance, and leaving out all the whatever, spending considerable time attacking his perceived critics by lifting up his petticoat periodically during his presentation of the budget and treating Guyanese to what is commonly known as a session abusing. Maybe he was trying to outdo the legendary Satira Gal. One wonders if the Honorable Ashley Singh saw that even his colleagues were bored and really were not excited by this budget presentation. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Ashley Singh, who allows himself to be lectured by a de facto president of Guyana, even went further to debase this Honorable House when by referring to another MP by a call name. And he was on his feet. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Ashley Singh was not cautioned by the Speaker, so I take it that it is now acceptable to use call names in this Honorable House and in different ways. In Wapishana language, there is a name called Chibub. Chibub. This is a fitting description of the Honorable Ashley Singh. It is not debasing nor disrespectful. It is my hope that those who cannot take their nostril out of the gutter do make an effort to do so. Mr. Speaker, we heard the Honorable Ashley Singh parroting the fiction that the APNU AFC fired some 2,000 CSOs in 2015 on their ascension to government. I did not start that call name. He who started it will have to say he started it and ask for forgiveness. Mr. Speaker, I have also heard the PPP at various forums and occasions. Let me repeat this. Mr. Speaker, we heard the Honorable Ashley Singh parroting the fiction that the APNU AFC fired some 2,000 CSOs in 2015 on their ascension to the government. Mr. Speaker, I have also heard the PPP at various forums and occasions repeating this untruth with impunity. Mr. Speaker, I wish to once again correct this fallacy. In 2015, on the APNU AFC's ascension to government, it found a cancelled check that was prepared and processed to pay some 2,000 CSOs at that time. I repeat that the check was cancelled. On inquiry, it was found that it was the People's Progressive Party's cabinet that issued the instruction for the then permanent secretary acting to cancel the check or to fire the CSOs. Mr. Speaker, the cabinet secretary who issued the directive to cancel the check is none other than the Honorable Gail Teixeira, who is here with us today. It was the People's Progressive Party that fired the 2,000 indigenous CSOs.
Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable Minister is on a point of order.
Mr. Speaker, under the Standing Orders 41, I never signed any such instruction, nor gave any such instruction in writing or verbally. And I wish that to be retracted from the honorable member's presentation.
Thank you, Minister. Honorable Member, unless you could produce that document, you'll have to withdraw it. And if you produce that document, I'll be able to reinstate your words.
Mr. Speaker, at this moment here, I cannot do that, so I will withdraw it. Mr. Speaker, what kind of person would... let me not continue with that. Mr. Speaker, we also listened to the Honorable Ashley Singh, who said that the sum of $2.7 billion from the sale of carbon credits will be granted to indigenous peoples in this 2024 budget. It must be noted that in 2023's budget, the indigenous people received some $4.7 billion from the sale of carbon credits. Mr. Speaker, using an actual example, in a certain indigenous community with 180 families in 2023, each family received for a project an average of Guyana 180,000 or a bit more for a sustainable project. It means that under this 2024 budget, the families in this village would be entitled to a much smaller amount. Mr. Speaker, for the indigenous peoples to access this pittance from the sale of their carbon credits, they had to jump through a lot of loops and over a lot of hurdles, which condescendingly being told how to spend the monies. This is in contrast to the distribution of grants from the national coffers by the PDP activists who are wearing red shorts to friends and families and supporters, giving grants, and all done without acceptable financial accountability. So the indigenous people have to have accountability, nothing wrong, but it must happen to everybody. When you're sharing grants, let's have accountability. Not one family who's supposed to get 200,000 gets 200,000. Not when somebody looks at a young Amerindian child in a village and say, "Oh, you're looking nice, you're giving her 200,000." All sorts of things happen. So let us have some financial accountability. Mr. Speaker, now the monies from the sale of the indigenous people's carbon credits are under the Amerindian Development Fund, or ADF. Mr. Speaker, according to the Auditor General's report in 2014, some $1.2 billion were paid into the ADF by the Ministry of Natural Resources, in keeping with Section 51.3 of the Amerindian Act of 2006, which states that the Geology and Mines Commission shall transfer 25% of royalties from mining activities to a fund designated by the Minister for the benefit of Amerindian communities. To date, Mr. Speaker, this amount cannot be accounted for. And guess who was the minister that presided over this calamity? Mr. Speaker, we do appreciate that our carbon credits were sold, but we do not appreciate that the Minister of Amerindian Affairs, and by extension the government of Guyana, has complete control over the concept and the process of implementation. Mr. Speaker, just imagine that I go to someone's farm and reap and sell his watermelons without free prior informed consent. Then I give him 15% of the total sales. Further, I insist that he spends the money in a certain way. What kind of phrase would the average Guyanese use to describe this ice pass? I cannot say it in Parliament, but there is a phrase. And further, Mr. Speaker, there are reports of some staff of the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs abusing their position of trust. One village, and being informed of the carbon credit monies being available, decided on the formula for each household to get an amount for a sustainable project. On arrival at the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs, the Tusha was ordered to disregard his people's wishes and to purchase a second-hand bus. To make this story short, the village rejected the bus and returned it to the supplier. And a community development officer in another area purchased second-hand vehicles for several communities. These vehicles were found to be in poor condition and of poor quality. The CDO now sports a well-reconditioned vehicle for his personal use. Wow. Mr. Speaker, the above examples are just a minuscule amount of the actual situation that currently exists. But it is difficult to remedy the situation because good governance, fair play, and justice are super deficient in the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs, and by extension, the government of Guyana. Indigenous villages, Tushas, and persons are routinely discriminated against if they are perceived to be non-supporters of the PPP. Any fictitious or contrived complaint against a perceived non-supporter of the PPP gets the full powers of the Amerindian Act and the laws thrown at them. On the contrary, there are many cases in which persons aligned to the PPP and are accused of serious illegalities are allowed to walk free and to continue to flout the laws with impunity. Well, we'll call that name later. Mr. Speaker, further we note the People's Progressive Party is visibly seeking to control or stymie the activities of our constitutional bodies, such as the Indigenous Peoples Commission. Currently, the PEP is attempting to place Atu Shao, who is accused of misappropriation of village assets by his villagers, to become a member of the Indigenous Peoples Commission. Further, Mr. Speaker, the PPP and its Ministry of Amerindian Affairs have tried their utmost to derail the Amerindian Peoples Association because of this organization's advocacy for the rights of the indigenous peoples. The Ministry of Amerindian Affairs attempts to derail the Upper Mazaruni District Council, and that is another blatant attempt to prevent the indigenous peoples of Guyana from organizing themselves, and as encouraged and recognized by the United Nations. Mr. Speaker, it must be noted that it was the APNU-AFC coalition that broke barriers by supporting the South Rupununi to form the South Rupununi District Council. Today, this organization is recognized and is an example of good governance and positive representation for its peoples. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Ashley Singh mentioned that accumulatively the indigenous people will get $9 billion out of the $1 trillion budget. Mr. Speaker, this amount can best be described as condescending and in comparison to what is doled out to the failing sugar industry. Mr. Speaker, action speaks louder than words. One cannot help but notice that the failing sugar industry continues to enjoy massive financial inputs. In this year's budget, Guy Super receives a whopping $6 billion. Mr. Speaker, to add to this story, we are hearing in Region 9 that periodically agricultural products are trucked in large quantities from Brazil to be repacked as being produced in Guyana. Is sugar being trucked from Brazil to beef up Gaisuko's statistics? The story goes further. The large trucks are given special considerations while in transit from Latam to the coast of Guyana. The only component missing is a set of outriders with sirens. Mr. Speaker, we welcome the building of the secondary school and its facilities in Karasabay. It must be noted that it was under APNU AFC that steps were put in place to start and support secondary school classes in Karasabay. Secondary school classes also began in Murnau and Napi and elsewhere. Mr. Speaker, while considering the budgetary allocations for secondary education last year, I raised the issue of providing a hot meal for all secondary school students in the hinterland. The then Minister of Local Government and Regional Government stated in his answer that all secondary school students will be entitled to a hot meal whenever they attend school. Mr. Speaker, I was going to say today this has not come to fruition, but this morning somebody from Region 9 texted me to say that yesterday the secondary school received a little bit of food in school. So at least you're listening to us, and let's continue to listen so we can be able to make things better for our indigenous children and the children of Guyana. Mr. Speaker, only the students who reside in the dormitories are benefiting from 3 meals a day, plus a so-called snack of a banana without juice. Mr. Speaker, as an example that applies to St. Ignatius and Annex secondary schools in Region 9, the students attend the secondary schools miles away. They leave from early morning and return back home late. If the student has no money, then he has to starve. Mr. Speaker, in this Irish country, this is totally unacceptable. Mr. Speaker, we heard a senior PPP's official boasting that some $10 billion will be spent on hinterland roads. However, years come and go, and we know that the roads built by the PPP are mainly of biscuit texture. One example of this is the Latam to South Rupununi roads. At this moment, the road is being renovated at an extremely high cost. Drivers and commuters will enjoy the biscuit roads until the rains arrive, and it is back to roads that will make a moderately sick person become very sick before he or she can get to the hospital. Mr. Speaker, during the consideration of budgetary appropriations last year, I suggested to the government that hinterland roads should include innovations that exist and would allow for better hinterland roads to be built. However, this suggestion seems to have fallen on the deaf ears of the PPP. One can only surmise that it is better for the PPP to have biscuit roads built so that they can continue to dole out large contracts with their attendant kickbacks to their friends, families, and favorites. Mr. Speaker, then there is the fallacy propagated by the PPP that it is the creation of the concept of transformational projects. In most cases, the really transformational projects were being done were conceptualized and preparatory works done by the APNU AFC. The Linden to Latham Road is an example of a transformational project that was conceptualized and preparatory work done by the APNU AFC. It must be noted that had there not been a no confidence motion orchestrated by the PPP, the first phase from Linden to Marlborough would have already been a reality. It must be further noted that the PPP made efforts to prevent this project from becoming a reality, but luckily the funders applied pressure and forced them to utilize the funding that was negotiated by the APNU AFC for this project. Further, we are now hearing that the most vital bridge connection between Kurupukari and Fairview has been shelved. Here again, we see the reluctance of the PPP to serve the people by completing wholesome transformational projects or their inability to see further than their nostrils. Mr. Speaker, I'm talking about bridges. Is it true that there is a newly constructed bridge on the Linden to Latham Road that is built on a hill? One wonders if the PPP is trying to defy the forces of gravity. And Mr. Speaker, what about the Pirara Bridge? This bridge is vital for Latham, South Rupununi, and Brazil to connect by road to the North Rupununi and the coast of Guyana. Work is at a standstill, and if not completed before the rains, that will be here shortly. There will be untold suffering experienced by all. This is a case of more for friends, family, and favorites at the expense and suffering of the people of Guyana. Mr. Speaker, then there is the road and bridge connection between Latham and St. Ignatius Village in Region 9. The PPP did some basic repairs of this bridge and sides of the road, and then proudly announced that it had done a transformational project. Mr. Speaker, this bridge and road link is a crucial project because periodically the floods inundate this vital link that connects the South Rupununi to Latham. Secondary school children also travel to and from school on this link. There are reports of both capsizing and near-drowning experiences by students. A truly transformational project would be to build a bridge and a road connection, but to be high enough to allow commuters to travel this connection all year round, even when there is a high flood. Mr. Speaker, now we have a major problem of most Guyanese finding it difficult to live good lives because of the high cost of living being experienced. The few friends, families, and favorites of the PPP have no idea of the daily suffering experienced by many to make ends meet. During the days when APNU AFC was in government, the average family of four spent an acceptable portion of their income on food and essentials. Today, under this PPP, the majority of Guyanese are finding it hard to get 3 decent meals daily. Mr. Speaker, according to Kaiju News, dated January 20th, 2023, 43% of Guyanese cannot afford a healthy diet, and around 5% of our population are malnourished. This is according to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization's report. Mr. Speaker, with all of the above, the PPP's 2024 budget insults our pensioners with $100 increase per day. Just what can $100 per day do to improve the lives of our senior population? The budget allocates $108 Guyana per day or $40,000 per year as a Because We Care cash grant to school children for 1 year. What is $108 per day? That is because they do not care. They do not care. The Tushals of Guyana get an amount of $80 Guyana a day as their stipend, whilst working 24 hours a day. What a disgrace. I hope I can say the word disgrace. What a disgrace but our indigenous peoples, or leaders, indigenous leaders, are being treated in this way. Our public servants receive a measly 6.5 increase in their income, while the Gas to Show project, that is a brainchild of someone who has a penchant for advocacy for failed projects, gets a huge slice of the pie. Isuko continues to suck our economy like a leech. We can only say that this budget is indeed staying the course, and that course is a big curse for Guyana. Mr. Speaker, budget after budget, we see money is being allocated for land titling and revision of the Amerindian Act. When will it be done? To cut a long story short, when will it be done? Yes, it will be us as the next government who will have to do that. Mr. Speaker, but the Honorable Minister forgot to mention, Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Ashley Singh mentioned that some villages were given titles by this government, the PPP. But Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Minister forgot to mention that some of those villages that he mentioned were previously granted titles by APNO AFC. One example was Yupukari's extension that APNU AFC granted previously, among others. And I could call it Tushaw if I get a chance now to call it Tushaw of Yupukari to come here and tell you that that is what happened, although you are saying no. Mr. Speaker, indeed, staying the course is ongoing for the PPP. However, the course is one to weaken the rights of the indigenous peoples. Mr. Speaker, the People's Progressive Party used its position as the government of Guyana to take over aspects of the control of Marudi mines from the indigenous people and small miners of the South Rupununi. Today, there is a People's Progressive Party group controlling the riches being gained from the area that was allocated by GGMC. This is staying the course to make the PPP's friends, families, and favorites hog the patrimony of Guyana.
Now remember, to stay the course, you're going to have to get 5 minutes to conclude.
Thank you. Comrade Speaker, I do move that the honorable member be given 5 minutes to conclude his presentation.
Thank you, honorable member. You have 5 minutes to conclude.
Mr. Speaker, the indigenous village of Chinese Landing has been struggling for many years to regain control of Tasavini, a mineral-rich area of their title land that was being mined by a certain miner without their consent. Mr. Speaker, the Chinese Landing village appealed to the Inter-American Commission for Human Rights, and the commission agreed that there were some issues and some of the rights, many of the rights of the indigenous peoples were being affected. So, an order that corrective actions be taken. The PPP government has since ordered a cease order on all mining activities in the whole of Chinese Landing, although the village had only requested that cease order for mining operations be done in Tasavini. It must be noted that the indigenous peoples are allowed by law to do artisanal mining on their title lands. The move by the PPP's government to stop mining in the entire Chinese Landing is seen as a move to punish the Carib people of Chinese Landing for standing up for their rights. Also, the PPP government is now asking the ISCHR to withdraw precautionary measures granted regards to Chinese Landing. This government here has no regard for the indigenous people. You allow them, you make sure that they cannot get monies to survive on their own, from their own lands. And now you are pointing to allow or ask the ISCHR to step away from their defense. They must be left alone to take the bashing that you want to give them. Mr. Speaker, and to continue the rights of indigenous people, I wish to bring to the nation and all that the Petroleum Activities Bill recently passed by the PPP's slim majority in Parliament gives the Minister of Natural Resources, and by extension the PPP, supreme powers to identify areas of petroleum exploration, negotiate and allow such exploration and production in any part of Guyana. This act disregards any free prior informed consent by the affected communities. This act strikes against the fundamental rights of the indigenous peoples. On behalf of the indigenous peoples of Guyana, I ask that this act be repealed. Mr. Speaker, although monies have been allocated for the rich, okay, we're done with that. Mr. Speaker, There are some issues that are affecting indigenous people, and I will try to go through them in this short period of time. One, American Hostel in Georgetown. Patients have to find their own transport to go to the hospital. Just imagine, patients have to find their own transport to go to the hospital at our American Hostel in Georgetown, and the minister is just a stone throw away. Meals are often in short supply. Our rich country, and this is how we're treating our indigenous people. There is a need for a residential doctor to be on site. And in Region 9, there continues to be a shortage of cassava in the Rupununi. Cassava is the main staple of the Rupununi. There were some interventions by the government, I must say, but it was not enough. In 1999, when I was the regional vice chairman, with the support of even the boss man in the house, we had lots and lots of cassava coming from Brazil, Manoa in Brazil. At that time, we asked for help from the PEP government and refused to give us help, but we got help. The stems were distributed according to the needs of the farmers. This was done to counteract the effects of the harsh El Nino season. The people of Region 9, after that, got back into production of cassava, and I want to use the opportunity to thank the people of Manoa in Brazil, who gave us this high-yielding cassava stems free of charge. And they said, I will talk about that another time. And now calling the common government to place some emphasis on the cassava crops in Brazil. Other crops are important, but at this moment, the cassava is most important for food security and the battle against hunger and destitution. Mr. Speaker, we've had cases in Guyana where our children have been placed in situations where they had no way of defending themselves. And one of those ways was when a young indigenous child was raped and sodomized. Mr. Speaker, what we saw was the alleged perpetrator being given state protection and was allowed to walk free. By this episode,
Honorable
you can
member,
clearly see
I'll give you a minute to wrap up. You're already a couple of minutes over the 5 minutes.
justice for indigenous people. And the Madia disaster, what we notice is that at the end of it all, in a nutshell, everybody has got blamed, excepting the government of Guyana. The people who were directly involved were not blamed. The regional executive officer wasn't blamed. The minister of local government wasn't blamed. The minister of education wasn't blamed. The minister of labor wasn't blamed. These were the persons to be blamed for what happened there. Apparently, it was felt that indigenous lives do not matter. Mr. Speaker, and the compensation given, I would call it jokey compensation. Lives of indigenous children, or any child, is not $5 million. You're cheapening our lives. That's why at one time I said, take your feet. The people here must take their feet off the necks of the indigenous people.
I remember with that, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up totally.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. And now for the Honorable Member, Ms. Yvonne Pearson.
Come on. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to give my contribution to Budget 2024 under the caption, Staying the Course, Building Prosperity for All. Mr. Speaker, as I listen to the many presenters before me, particularly those on the opposition side, and hearing the description of the budget. The honorable member, Mr. Rosdale Ford, said the budget is built on sinking sand. Sinking sand. Sock sand or whatever, that can be washed away, I imagine. The honorable Mr. Ramjatan, he also said the budget is built with cement and sand. He adds some cement to the budget. Mr. Speaker, I would like to say that budget 2024 is built with rock-hard cement, with sand, a good mixture. And the builders are the People's Progressive Party Civic. And I would like to say thank you to the Honorable Minister, Dr. Ashley Singh, and his staff, and all those who contributed in putting Budget 2024 together, staying the course, building prosperity for all, Mr. Speaker. Budget 2024. Mr. Speaker, I wish to remind those on the opposition side that when we came to office, when we returned to office after a severe struggle, our 2020 budget, we said our plan for prosperity. Our plan for prosperity. 2021, we said a path to recovery. Why did we say recovery? Because things were severely damaged. There was destruction in this country. We know it. The people out there know it, Mr. Speaker. So we said a pathway to recovery. 2022, we said steadfast against all challenges. Yes, we are steadfast against all challenges that come before us because we are strong. We are the People's Progressive Party, and we are strong together. And we are preaching a one Guyana, and the opposition fail to understand that, and they fail to accept what we are doing, Mr. Speaker. 2023, improving the lives today, building prosperity for tomorrow. 2024, staying the course, because we've already laid the foundation that they attempt to destroy. So this foundation is of solid rock, rock-hard cement, and not sinking sand. No way. Mr. Speaker, allow me to make some corrections. I listened to Mr. Vincent Henry, the honorable member, and even Mr. Rosdale Ford. Now everyone has awakened from the slumber, and they now realize that indigenous peoples are so badly off. 32% under poverty and whatever. Mr. Speaker, I would like to know how they measure poverty. How they measure poverty and what they did when they were there to address poverty of the indigenous peoples. Tell us that. Now they awake from a long slumber and they realize. I do agree with Mr. Cox and the others who say, and Mr. Vincent, the honorable member, who say we are the front line. Yes, the indigenous peoples, we are in the front line, and we will operate as though we are in the front line. We are not holding back benches anymore. No, we are in the front line. We have a voice. People listen to us, but we must come with facts, the truth. And so when Mr. Henry talked about carbon sales and the money and what has been done, I would like to say to the honorable member, sir, spend your time in educating our Tushaus, because I would like to say in this very dome here, all the Tushaus were here when we know our allocation from the carbon sales, when we were advised how to spend it. And I am shocked. I'm shocked this morning when I heard that the honorable members say families receive whatever. We were advised that this money should be invested, economic opportunities which would create jobs for our people in our various villages, which would address food security, sir. So what has happened? If there's a breakdown, you blame the government for everything, when we as Tushao, and I'm speaking as a Tushao here too, because I'm a Tushao of my village. I'm a farmer, I'm an ordinary person in my village. But I have the opportunity to speak at this forum. And I want to thank the People's Progressive Party Civic for giving me the opportunity so I can know what is happening at the grassroots level and I can know what is happening at the national level. We have a voice, honorable member, and we must use our voice. We must use our voice. So the point of family receiving $100,000 or $200,000, I am shocked. I am disappointed because we are supposed to have a development plan in all our villages. All of our villages, we're supposed to have a development plan. And we should be using the funds from the carbon sales to enhance further development in our villages. Sir, the Amerindian Act, if you should read part 3 on the governance, which gives us the right to manage, to govern our villages. And so again, here I urge you, sir, to educate yourself on the Amerindian Act. Educate yourself, sir, and then try to educate our Tushao so they would know their responsibility as leaders of villages. Please, sir, do that. I would also like to correct you, sir, and I would like you to go and do some homework. You said that Tushaos only receive $40,000 per month. Please go and do your homework, sir, and correct that figure. Thank you. I would also like to say, you know, I don't support name calling. But if you're going to call me a name in a different language, please explain it in English what it meant. So when you say Shabak, I think I also would like to know what it means, because I myself can say a word in my language and then nobody would know what I'm calling them. So I don't support that. Mr. Speaker, I would like to say, budget 2024. All right, budget 2024. Staying the course, building prosperity for all. As I said before, thanks to the Honorable Dr. Ashni Singh. I wish to remind, in 2021, I said it, the ordinary people, the Guyanese people, as I move around, I've heard all sorts of things, but I heard many people said, Ashni is back. That is the man for the job. And I'm saying it again. Ashni is back. That is the man for the job. And the opposition can't take it. Can't take it. Mr. Speaker, I wish to further make some corrections. Yesterday, the Honorable Member, Mr. Ronald Cox, in his presentation, he spoke of hinterland school feeding program. But what he failed to do or to say, that what he reported was the report submitted, and I wish to present here, Mr. Speaker, I wish to read, I wish to quote the executive summary of the report for the Auditors General on the Hinterland School Feeding Program. And here is what it says, Mr. Speaker. Studies conducted by the World Food Program show every day countless children turn up for school on an empty stomach, which makes it hard to focus in class. Having food at school daily can mean not only better nutrition and health, but also increased access to education. Annually, millions of dollars were spent on hinterland school feeding program. Therefore, it was important to determine whether expenditure of the program was properly planned and used for the purpose intended, and whether every child was eligible for a nutritious meal actually received one. The audit covered the period from January 1, 2018 to the 30th of June, 2022. Now, Mr. Speaker, from January 18, who was there? Who was there? What we found, they found the school feeding program expanded. They found that students not catered for due to poor planning, meals and monitored for compliance with nutritional standards. Meals were not. So these are some of the things that happened under the APNU. So Mr. Cox should have said the period of reporting. The reporting period. I also wish to say, Mr. Speaker, the honorable member also reported on the receipt, storage, and distribution of textbooks to school. Once again, Mr. Speaker, the honorable member failed to say the reporting period. And this reporting period was conducted January 2017 to December 2019. Mr. Speaker, when we come to the House, we must come with facts. And I'm not reading from something that was written by me or any one of my colleagues. I'm reading from the Auditor's General report, sir. And therefore, it must be corrected that the time period is wrong. 2018, 2017, 2019. And I think this is willful act, maliciously done just to make us look bad. But Mr. Cox, we're not going to look bad because things has changed. Things has changed. Sir, Mr. Speaker, so no, things has changed for better because budget 2023 says improving lives today, building prosperity for tomorrow. And when we say something, we mean it. When we make a promise, we are delivering on our promises. And we don't fluff and bluff because we know a lot of fluff and bluff took place 2015 to 2020, Mr. Speaker. Before I move on, sir, I still would like to go back to the honorable member, Mr. Vincent Henry, on the issue of land titling. Sir, I could produce to this House when the former Minister of Amerindian Affairs said in 2018, May of 2018, I think if I remember correctly, the 30th day of May in 2018, when he said to the media, I have not been able to title one village. I have not been able to title one village. And so, Mr. Speaker, when honorable members come with it, say, come with the fact. And Mr. Speaker, I can say these things because I was part of the land titling project. And most of the villages that the APNU have no claim that they titled. We have already done the work before we left office, sir. I can produce those evidence. And I can say it because I was there.
Before you say more, honorable member, you need an extension.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask that the honorable member be given an additional 5 minutes to conclude her presentation, a very good presentation.
Thank you, Minister Teixeira. Go ahead, honorable member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me move on to some of our success story and stop rebutting the opposition. Mr. Speaker, I would like to talk about agriculture. Guyana was once the food basket of the Caribbean. We will get there again under the stewardship of the People's Progressive Party Civic, and more so our Honorable Minister, Minister Zulfikar, who is going out there meeting with the people. Honorable Minister, I would only like to speak on Region 2 and what is happening in our Amerindian villages, Mr. Speaker. As I speak here now, land has been drainage and irrigation in the Pomeroon area, which would allow the people of St. Monica, Kabakamori, Siriki to extend in the field of agriculture, addressing the issue of flooding. In the coastal area, Mr. Speaker, as I speak now, 80 acres of land has already been cleared and cultivated in the village area. We are already discussing with Topco, the juice company, to supply them thousands of pounds of passion fruit. Tell me, Mr. Speaker, if that is not development, and this is not building now, the foundation was set already. We are building on that foundation. And citrus do not only passion fruit. As I speak now, we have already harvested thousands of pounds of pumpkin and other cash crops. This is what you call development in the field of agriculture. Never before our Amerindian villages have moved from subsistence farming. Now we are in commercial agriculture, thanks to the People's Progressive Party Civic, and more so our Honorable Minister. I would like to talk about the new projects, Shade House. Mr. Speaker, it's the first time we are now looking at high value crops. In my village and other villages, we are now experimenting with cauliflower, broccoli, and carrot, with support from the National Agriculture Research Institute, NARI. They are working very closely. This is what is happening. Let me say about the new project, the fish project. Cage fishing is now established in our villages. We are part of it. And Mr. Speaker, young people are being trained. They are trained to be part of these projects. They are managing the project, Mr. Speaker. This is what we call development. This is what we are saying. Staying on course. Budget 2024 would help us to build on the foundation. We will stay on course, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me tell you about training. The bits under the Ministry of Labor. I would want to say thanks to the Honorable Minister, Joseph Hamilton, who traveled the length and breadth of this country. Under this project, Mr. Speaker, previously, there was no licensed heavy-duty operator in our villages. Today, as I stand here, Mr. Speaker, and I must let it be known that these training programs are taken to the villages. So now what is happening? The people are at home and they come out of classes during the time when they can afford. We set the time, so even if you have to go to your farm, we set it that when you home, you come and learn. Mr. Speaker, as I stand here, 11 persons graduated from Mainstay Wayaka, where I had no licensed tractor driver. 11 persons graduated on their driver's license, and I will proudly say 7 of those persons are women. Women, Mr. Speaker. 7 of those persons are young women. And I wish to mention an outstanding young woman who is just 19 years of age, Kishana Finance. She operates a tractor trailer and she can even operate an excavator. Thanks to the government of Guyana and more so, Honorable Minister Hamilton. In the Pomeroon, Mr. Speaker, the boat building project under this program, the BITS program, the boat building, young women are involved in building boat, Mr. Speaker. This is what you call development. Budget 2024 will help us to stay on course. Prosperity for all, not some. Gone are the days, Mr. Vincent Henry, Honorable Member, when indigenous peoples were left behind. So don't come and cry here, sir. I would encourage you, go out there and talk to your villagers, talk to your leaders, get on board, think straight, and stop sharing messages that are not true. We are the front line. Let us take our rightful position in the front line. Mr. Speaker, education, health, there has been tremendous improvement in the area of health. Our health post and our health center, there's adequate supply of drugs. Unlike what happened under the APNU, APNU, I remember I went to Koja Canal and we could not even get a Panadol. No way. Today, we have adequate supply of drugs. Not no expired drugs, no. Drugs and medical supply are there. Mr. Speaker, allow me to mention the distribution.
Unfortunately, you're way over that 5 minutes. I wouldn't be able to allow you. You can say thank you.
Okay, we all have solar panels in our village through the government of Guyana. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We don't study with lamp anymore. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Thank you. Honorable members, this is a good time to take the suspension. We get back at 10 minutes to 2.
We are a peaceful people, struggle is we struggle, and we don't look for trouble, just ask around. But when outside faces from foreign places talk about taking over, we ain't backing down. We ain't giving up no mountains, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one caress, not a blade of grass. This land is all I know. We gonna make it somehow. We will bend like a bow and never break. Our fathers came here and they lived and died here. And we ain't moving nowhere, big mistake. Cause we ain't giving up no mountain, we ain't giving up no tree, we ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice grain, not one rice, not a blade of grass. We love the open country of the Rupununi and the Essequibo, the time of night. Though we may criticize it, this is our home, we love it.